Sure. Awesome. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, I think we've
And
exchanged some emails, didn't quite connect.
well, excited to connect now. And yeah, looking forward to chatting. Do you want to introduce yourself and then I'll go and we can kick it off from there?
Sure, sounds great. Um, Founder, CEO of Hamming, our objective is to make it extremely easy for organizations and enterprises to QA their voice agents, both pre-deployment and then post-deployment. That's the core mission of Hamming.
Awesome. Um, cool. Awesome. And typically, like, what do you see people building in voice AI? What kinds of
Um,
applications? So, like, it could be verticals, but also could be objectives, etc.
I think there's a lot of diversity in how people are deploying voice agents at the moment. I think most of the use cases that we end up seeing end up being on the enterprise side, where there's some agent being deployed in the medical FinServe use case. And brands often want to make sure whatever they're deploying, whatever stack they pick, is empathetic, it's natural, it is functional, the tool calls are working correctly, and the latencies are all dialed in for them to have a successful deployment. There's obviously concerns around security, red teaming, hallucinations, and so on that are just natural problems we end up encountering. I think there's a company I spoke with today that was actually that a consumer application, which is pretty novel. I don't see a lot of consumer these days. There's a lot of standard appointment booking, outbound sales, lead gen type flows, and I think we see a lot of that. But that's pretty much um, the style of use case that's quite common. Have you seen any
Yeah.
interesting consumer on your side?
Um, Not prototypically either, I would say. Like when we think about like voice applications, sort of by definition, are consumer facing, but are being built by enterprises or on behalf of enterprises or for enterprises. Like when it comes to consumer voice applications, they exist. Like in many ways, ChatGPT, the advanced voice mode is a consumer voice application, right? And the goals for a consumer application in voice aren't necessarily that different from an enterprise voice application's goals. Like you want someone to have a good experience, you want someone to finish the experience or like engage with the experience. And so, no, I guess the answer to your question is like, no, I don't think like people have figured out like what are the prototypical voice applications for that are marketed and sold to consumers or like the applications that are voice forward that are for consumers. Like I don't see a lot of that today.
Got it. That makes
And I
sense.
think to the extent that they exist, they do exist, like companionship applications for senior citizens, for example. Um, like for the phone, like a phone first experience for senior citizens to have companionship, for example. How are people evaluating those applications? I don't really know. But at the same time, I don't really know how OpenAI is evaluating ChatGPT other than like are people using it every week kind of thing. Whereas an enterprise like cares about very particular things when it comes to building a voice application, shipping a voice application, testing a voice application.
What are some things you found based on deployments y'all have done at the enterprise? What ends up being the metrics that matter? Are these public benchmarks? Are these much more bespoke? Kind of how have you thought about it? We have our own opinion and happy to share, but I'm curious around what you've seen.
Proto so yes, I would say yes, 100%. And in fact, like I would often qualify a deal but based on do they have an outcome that they're trying to measure and maximize or minimize. And so for, fast food ordering use cases, like the metric they would care about is like how often are they able to complete an order, completely AI order. And in the large enterprise sort of contact center, BPO, IVR, conversational IVR setting, the outcome is often something like task completion or how often are people getting the information they want within the voice agent, right? Without having to be transferred to a human agent. Um, I think the thing that's awesome though is that people are surprised when they realize that they can measure things like how often is the bot saying how often is the human caller saying thank you to the bot, right? Like that's not something that they ever measured before because a year ago no one was saying thank you. Do you know what I mean? And so like
Yeah.
I like selling to teams of developers who have an outcome that they're trying to maximize for, because then it's like, okay, we can help you. But if you don't, then it's kind of like I think then it becomes vibes. Like, do we like this voice? Do we think the ASR system is working? Do we like the LLM? It's kind of like, okay, but what's the goal? But yeah, what do you
That
think?
sounds good. I think we've seen as a testing company, people often ask us, hey, what should we be measuring? Like, how do we figure out what stack we should pick for executing our workflows?
Mm,
This is specifically at the enterprise kind of business outcome, level.
mhm.
And I think folks often use public benchmarks as a proxy of how well whatever API providers or vendors or partners they're sort of working with will work for them. And um, generally, the most successful teams end up being very data driven and outcome driven and analytics driven, where there's a clear KPI and a clear motivation to pick the right stack that optimizes for that. So I think more sophisticated teams end up being more DSE, data science, MLE. That's kind of my background in orientation and very impact focused. And so they do run A/B tests, for example, either pre-production or post-production to figure out, hey, what actually leads to higher or lower containment rates, for example. Um, and so that's sort of like the best kind of teams that
Yes,
we
I
love to work
agree.
with. Just philosophical, it's just like super hard to do it any other way from our standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think like from the perspective of a team that builds speech synthesis, TTS models, right? Like it's a fragmented landscape, right? And so like if we're selling to a voice application platform company, right? Like they're putting demos in front of their prospects, and those demos have to blow the prospects away, right? But like the same thing that works in a demo doesn't necessarily work in production, right?
Hmm.
From even just like the voice that you pick. And so like when we pitch like, oh, you should A/B test voices, there's a class of people who are like 100% we're going to do that. And then there's a class of people who are like, well, we just need to win deals. Right. And so the market is so early that I think a lot of these design and UX partners haven't even had the chance to emerge. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It just depends on the KPI that teams are, I guess, goaled against. When there's a very clear existing workflow and, when the pipeline's strong, then the goal is around
Yes.
retention and the actual outcome. And if it's more early stage, then yeah, it's more acquisition on, hey, what sounds cool?
Yeah.
Kind of
What sounds cool? What
immediately.
sounds fast? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, this is very impressive, super cool. Speaking of demos, there's a lot of demoware
Oh,
out there.
it's easy to make demoware now. I was thinking about this the other day, like before LLMs, there was no like demo voice application. Like you had to, right? Like in the era of like intent-based classification, like in order to make a fully fledged demo, you would have to like basically build a production application. And so that's I think something that's very unique about building voice applications in 2025 is like if you go to the Rime homepage, you can talk to Rime, but it's like literally something you can vibe code in an hour. Can it do anything? No, it can't do anything. It's not hooked up to any API, it's not making any tool calls, right? It's doing nothing. And so yeah, I mean it's so easy to make a demo.
For sure. What have you seen to be um things that like why do these demos basically not convert into real prod things? Like what are behaviorisms you've seen? What are patterns of successful teams you've seen deploy um agents, using Rhyme, for example?
Yeah.
What does that actually look like? What does that playbook look like? Have you guys crystallized it? Hey, here's the kind of typical pattern ABC, or is it still being figured out right now for y'all?
I think we see a lot of different design patterns. Like we have customers, for example, who like are taking open source, smaller language models, fine tuning them using LoRa, and then dedicating them to very particular parts of the call flow, right? Like in the fast food context, it'd be like, here's our address taking model. Once we collect the address from the user, then we're going to have a separate fine-tuned, even smaller language model that's going to parse that address, right? Like, why do people do this? Because if you link up for many use cases, right? Like, by the way, like, I'm not saying if you link up for the fast food content in the fast food context, like an ASR model, an LLM, and TTS, and then all the required tool calling, et cetera, that you need to actually do things. Um, then it's going to be unsuccessful like in taking orders. It's just going to be more successful if you dedicate design and systems thinking to doing, for example, fine tuning models and then dedicating like multi-agent setup. So like we see that a lot. We see definitely, I think we see like tool calling as like the biggest weakness of LLMs and the way that you get around that, especially when you're making it like a phone call or receiving a phone call that requires a lot of tool calling is handing off to different LLMs that are
Mhm.
fine-tuned just to do very particular kinds of tool calling. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say like there's a winner yet when it comes to, I don't know what about you guys? I think you probably have a better idea than I do, to be honest, because we just are like really I think like today with the value prop of it'll change over time, but like today with the value proposition of Rime is like making it so that people aren't hanging up on your voice application, right? Like that voice you hear. But what do you see?
For sure. We've seen surprisingly number of distinct patterns that don't converge, that are effective in production. I think speech to speech has been very seductive. So far, it hasn't panned out, I would say, at least from our vantage point. We have pretty good data on this. Uh, the latency numbers are quite good, but the reliability is just not there. It's just not quite production ready. And it may be fine for a companionship style, application where it feels natural, it feels super nice, and that's great. But
Mm,
largely those applications have not being just not too complex, and therefore not
right.
that useful, and therefore not that differentiated. So I think speech to speech is super interesting. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it as well. Um, but it hasn't quite panned out. The promise to delivery ratio has not quite delivered, based on our testing, because a lot of folks end up running their agents in various permutations through a stack, and
Mm.
the cascading stack still ends up being like some variant of it still ends up being the way that people feel comfortable enough, where it's natural enough for them to deploy their stuff to prod. So I
And
think
when you mean
cascading is
like
still.
when you mean not reliable enough, what do you see like concretely?
The agent will just stop talking. I think
Okay.
tool calling is still fairly,
Yeah.
elementary. Like I think it's gotten better. And I think the Gemini Google team are pushing pretty hard, but it's just not comparable based on our real life benchmarking, maybe synthetic benchmarking, as well, kind of both synthetic
Yeah.
simulation based testing versus the prod analysis that we're doing. Um, But I think that the thing that has been surprising is how heterogeneous the deployment patterns end up being, because they're
Mm.
very domain specific and use case specific, and also skill set specific. Maybe some teams simply don't have the skill set to fine tune their own
Oh,
things, right? They just don't want to
that
get
I
into
know. Yeah,
it.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So they end up finding creative ways to monkey patch, do some pre-processing, some post-processing
Mm.
tricks, to get away, from a skill
Yeah.
set kind of mismatch.
Yeah. I think there's many use cases where and this is related to speech, like, but as a brief detour, right? Like there's many use cases where when you fine tune a model to collect someone's address, it's going to be very good at collecting an address, right? It's going to lack a lot of the general domain knowledge that is baked into a large language model, right? Is it going to be able to do like, can you fine tune a model to do like medical diagnosing? No, probably not. Like you probably want the generic model to do that, right? With a lot of the amorphous, quote unquote, world knowledge that's built into that model. And so, yeah, I'm not saying fine tuning is like the pattern. I think it's like fascinating that there are different patterns for different use cases and people are trying to figure those out. And I think
For
like
sure.
what we've learned, like context is always the hardest part, right? Because like if you're building a voice application that's doing like 45-minute phone calls to gather 7 or 8 different pieces of information, it's still actually hard to get the bot to not repeat a question, for
For
example.
sure. Super hard.
And like when you're talking to a human and you're 40 minutes into the conversation, you ask the question you already asked like 30 minutes ago, turns out that doesn't make for the best experience. It's like, oh, I think I already told you that actually. Um,
Were you not
but
listening
yeah,
when I
yeah, were you
answered
not
that
listening?
question?
By the way, like my boss told me I can't talk to AI anymore, so I'm gonna hang up on you. Um, um, but yeah, anyway, point being, like, I think that's part of the reason why speech-to-speech models are also just really hard to plan for today is like the context management. There's very little design pattern around the cascaded system for managing context, and there's zero knowledge about how to manage that in the speech-to-speech context. And listen, I think like monolithic, I don't think there's like multi-agent framework for thinking through speech-to-speech either, too.
For sure.
And from our perspective, like when is a customer happy with Rhyme? It's when people like the voices and when the voices pronounce everything correctly. And of course, a lot of things around latency and reliability of the API and feature level stuff. But controllability, like in speech-to-speech models, I think no one has any thoughts on. Even from a research perspective, no one has any thoughts on. I think that the layperson is like, oh, we're going to be able to prompt the speech model to pronounce brand names correctly, and it's like that sounds kind of magical. I mean, probably, I mean, maybe, yeah, probably, but like, I don't think anyone has any idea about how to do that right now. You know what I mean?
For sure. For sure.
But I
Yes,
agree with
it
you. Like for
is.
consumer applications, like there are benefits to speech models. Like the latency is one. The prosody, I think, because you're not mediating the whole application through text, like you can have a voice that responds to the voice of the user and not just like what the user is saying. And that's very powerful. And at the
Yeah,
same
that makes
time,
sense.
like people want to get things done in a voice application typically. Like in an enterprise voice application, the goal is to get something done. Also to build obviously a really nice experience. So like getting something done is a first order problem.
For
If you
sure.
can't get something done with a speech model, then there's no point in building with it.
Yeah, vibes, the style. The style is great.
Yeah.
Look, it sounds great, but I could not return my order, you know?
It, oh no, like, and by the way, like even with this fine-tuned stack, like fine-tuned multi-agent stack, 30, 40 fine-tuned models all orchestrated really nicely together, like really high order accuracy, like they're not automating 100% of orders, right? And so it's just a numbers game too. Like how do you get more and more performance out of this?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. This makes sense. Question, non-linear question maybe.
Yes, sure.
ASR ends up being one of the biggest areas of bottleneck from our testing, as in we do a lot of background noise injection and different accents and just like different ways of speaking that makes it super hard from an understanding standpoint. So
Mm,
garbage in, garbage out problem
yeah,
essentially here. And there's some tricks to use prompts to infill what the intent is and what probably the person's asking for. There's lots of tricks um,
I've seen these. Yeah.
around this. But AirStar is still a fundamental bottleneck. So I'm wondering, y'all are obviously on the synthesis side at the moment. Have you considered, and this could be a product roadmap question, I don't know. Have y'all considered kind of going deeper into ASR space? Because a lot of the outcomes, to some extent, are contingent on great, detailed, sort of precise understanding, accurate understanding of what was actually said um, downstream. So,
Yeah,
question, kind
of
of curious how you think about it.
alphanumerics and
Yeah,
emails and all this
yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think there's bottlenecks everywhere. I would say like it makes sense to view speech recognition as the first bottleneck because if you can't understand what someone's saying, then you don't have any ability to reason about what they're saying, and then you don't have any ability to like make what you're saying in response to what they're saying
Mm-hmm.
sound good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I also think at the same time, like we're very narrowly focused and want to remain very narrowly focused on doing what we're really good at. And so I personally don't. see us releasing like a speech recognition model just to release one. Like if we release something, I want it to be best in class. And, we're a small team. Like I think it takes all of our bandwidth to ship something really truly incredible on the speech synthesis side of things. And I'm not saying I would never say never. I also think like there's a world in which we skip a lot of this, like model by model release on our roadmap. Like I'm not saying speech to speech, but there are intermediaries between speech to speech and like ASR, LM, TTS that are truly in our product roadmap, and that's what truly excites me because I think like then we're delivering value that goes over and above just like, hey, you're using this model, we have a slightly better one. It's like, no, I kind of want to do something different too at the same time.
That makes sense. Maybe audio and natively, or like some sort of
Yes,
tokenization
yeah,
on either side.
or like yes, exactly. And I think people don't realize that like how open the problem space is. Like okay, we do have some subset of customers who are fine-tuning LLMs, right? Open source ones. Like maybe those customers want to fine-tune those LLMs to also, okay, have the reasoning ability. That's why they're doing it. It's like improve the reasoning ability on this particular domain for this model. But what if that model also generated speech in the same time, right? So it's like text in, audio, and text out, essentially. And what are the benefits there? It's like then the speech generation can be conditioned on the transcript, the entire call transcript, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So you're not sounding like excited in one part of the call and then not as excited in the latter part of the call. You can kind of have more intra-call coherence, right? So
Makes sense.
that's just one example, right? Instead of competing in this like marketplace of models, and this is just my pet peeve on the like artificial analysis type leaderboard. It's kind of like I think it optimizes for the wrong things in a lot of ways.
Commoditization of a few features, you know?
Why would we participate in that? Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't know. I just want to be different. I don't want to just be better.
That's cool. That sounds great. Last question. You guys have been releasing models and making progress at a pretty fast pace. How do you organize the eng team, product teams, research? Like how do you guys basically do the thing in a pretty fast sort of iterative way?
Oh
Simple
man, it
question.
takes no, it's not a simple question because like it's something we talk about every day. It's like, the exciting thing, by the way, about speech models is like if you had told anyone like 3 or 4 years ago that there was going to be speech models that were really good at doing like static content for, right, like audiobooks or for YouTube video narration, voiceover, and that there would be another set of models that would be really good at like real-time conversation for the enterprise. That would seem kind of contrarian. I think still today it seems contrarian, but what really excites me as an ML practitioner is that there are different models for different things, right? And like product roadmap wise, every single day we have team conversations about like how to prioritize what customers are asking for. And they're asking for things that are always reasonable, but things that no one is doing, right? From a modeling perspective. And so like it's true, we ship fast, and it also is like it's disappointing, like looking at our backlog of the things that like today no one is doing, but we have to be so disciplined and like modeling too, by the way, from a roadmap perspective is so hard because like you want to set yourself up for the thing that you want to do in a year. And that's not always transparent to you when you're setting product direction for the next month. How best to do that. And so it's a lot of trial and error. And it's a lot of taking one step backward in order to move 2 steps forward, honestly. And then with the aim of like taking 3 steps forward the next day. To give you an example, right? Like when we ship Arcana, Arcana doesn't have the same level of phonemic controllability that Mist does, but it's a lot more expressive. Like people love this is like next level real, right? Sounding. And so then the question is like, we have to do that. People need that. And then how do we like work backwards from there to get the thing that they've been using for years? So it's hard.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
Um,
That makes sense. I think it sounds like the good old kind of YC YCism. Talk to customers, build something people want.
It's the same stuff. It's the same stuff, honestly. It's the same stuff. Like build something that people want. Build something that people love, but they're always trade-offs.
Um, yeah, we think about velocity a lot on our side, and we're much more, I guess we're an infra company where we're at the application level. We're not doing true research and R&D the way you guys are doing it. Um, and yeah, I think the sort of formula for us is get the engineering team as close to customers as possible and just close the feedback loop because that's the eval loop for us
Yeah.
is to learn, understand where the gaps are and how we can give our customers more confidence in being able to iterate on different prompts, different models, different architectures, and so on. So the
I
engineering
mean,
question is always very important, kind of to me.
it's. Do you feel like you're learning like every day?
I think we have breakthroughs every couple days.
Yeah.
Our learning rate is ultra high at the moment. Like we're still learning what needs to be done. Um, you mentioned, year-long planning. I have some plans. They're always wrong
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the span of a year. But yeah, the learning rate is super high for our team in the way we're organized at the moment. And so that's a KPI that really matters. Because if you don't know
Yeah.
what to do, then therefore you do the wrong thing for longer, and therefore
Yes.
you like
And
fall
in a
short.
fast changing product uh ecosystem, like truly, I think Wild West, honestly.
It's
You
early.
have to learn.
It is
You have to
still
learn
super
very quick. It's
early.
still early.
It's super early right now. Everything is
Yeah.
very early.
Yes.
There are kings being crowned in different domains.
Prematurely. Prematurely, I think. I don't think 99% of this is shaken out yet. That's what's so exciting about it.
For sure. For sure. Awesome.
Awesome.
Any last questions or thoughts?
Um, what's I don't know, this is a dumb question maybe, but like what's most exciting to you about the next year for Hamming?
Um, what's most exciting over the next year? I think I'm excited for products and features that we haven't even
Mm,
thought through that are actually high impact for the team, for our customers, let's say, for eng
mm,
and product teams. And I think that is sort of what gets me the most excited is get to the edge of reality. I feel like we're very close to the edge of reality or what's even possible. And we're inventing patterns
yeah.
that don't exist, which is super cool. And that also means we get things wrong pretty often when shipping. There's a graveyard of things we've tried that have not worked. So I'm quite excited for a new class of observability and analytics for these conversation experiences, kind of going beyond just pre-deployment
Mm,
synthetic evals. I'm also
yeah.
excited to hopefully cross a Turing test through the help of models available externally and also internal efforts where our human voice agents, they just feel like a human, they react like a human, they interrupt like a human. They just stop talking randomly, like, hey, give me a couple seconds, I'll come back to you.
Yes.
So
Right.
a couple of these we can do right now already, but there's still a chasm between realism and the synthetics that we generate.
Mm,
And if we can cross that chasm, I think that's quite exciting from a generalization standpoint. Um, and do your pre-deployment testing results generalize out of sample in prod,
yeah.
right? Do real humans actually, if your score is going up on your synthetic benchmarks pre-deployment, does it actually go up post-deployment?
Mm,
That is still sort of semi-correlated or not completely correlated at the moment. And so getting that generalization tied in, I think is very, very important. That's basically a breakthrough for our space.
I think from the modeling perspective, I agree with you. Like the biggest chasm from my vantage point between a real conversation and a conversation with a voice agent is that the conversations with voice agents, no matter what paradigm, even in the so-called speech-to-speech paradigm, are truly turn-based, right?
Hmm.
Like you say something, the voice agent says something. Yeah, of course you can
Hmm.
interrupt a voice agent, but the voice agent, by the way, is never going to interrupt you because it's always
Hmm.
waiting.
Hmm.
And when you say something, it has to say something. There's no not saying something either.
Track
Do you know what I mean?
completion all the way down to the core,
Exact,
next token
exactly.
prediction.
Exactly. And so they're like next token prediction. ways of modeling duplex conversation, but like for me, it's not until that's the biggest difference in the probability distribution of a simulation versus in the wild is like humans don't expect to operate turn-based.
Yeah, totally agreed. Fully aware
No,
of the pros and cons.
that's
Yeah,
what no,
fully
no.
aware.
It's not a pro and con thing. It's like it's not gonna feel real until the bot is like laughing while you're talking and saying mm-hmm and interrupting you as a user. That's my
Agreed.
perspective.
Yeah, agreed.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.